Okay, hopefully we are back. Oh, I need to change some Discord things and then I can... Okay, now I'm back on the correct thing. And now I can show you the game once OBS decides to show it. There we go. Okay, unfortunately, I've had a game... Why are people out on inters and wets? Actually, I think I've set the volume a bit too quiet. Having lots of issues. My game crashed when the lobby first loaded in. But Mackenzie Khan crosses the timing beam with a 16-2. Which... This sounds way too quiet to me. Or maybe it's... Maybe I need to turn up my headphones. Okay, Keela does a 15-9, Pena does a 17-1, Robinson does an 18-6. We'll see what's going on with Churek on those intermediates, because that is an interesting choice of tyre. In qualifying, at least, on a dry track. Oh, my monitor's also freaking out now. That is a bit annoying, but fortunately, my monitor freaking out is only a problem for me, not for you. And I also need to check that the stream is up and everything, and all of that stuff. So I'm quickly going to just go back to the really janky thumbnail, and then try and get it up. See if the stream is working. It seems like it is. Okay, there's one person watching. Not sure if that's me. But I'll try and get back onto the action about now. And looking at the OBS things, it seems like the game is now a little bit too high. So I think... Wait, what? I want like 3.5. Or maybe I'll just turn up my volume a little bit. Okay. I think we're good now. It seems like Turek's actually trying to do a flying lap. As I'm only getting... I'm having so many technical problems. The frame rate on my end is absolutely abysmal. I think I'm going to have to see what's happening with that. As Stack has decided to go out on the full wets, which is an even more questionable decision than the inters. Because although the inters do somewhat work in the dry until they overheat, the wets just completely... They don't work. Like 12 seconds a lap slower and then they overheat. Like that. And then they have no grip. Is there anyone on a lap right now? Mitch has just done a 37.3 and has 3.4 laps of fuel, so he's likely on a flying lap, so we'll ride on board with the rest of it. Okay, apparently frame rate is fine on stream. What I meant by I'm having problems on my end is that I was having like... briefly I had 55 FPS. But now it seems to have fixed itself, and now I'm pinned at 90, which I've had set as a frame cap. Because in a league race, as unfortunately Mitch bins it and actually gets terminal damage, which is really not good. It doesn't feel great sitting out however many minutes. I think it's like 10 minutes or something. But we have a bunch of people on out laps. Ken, I believe, is on an in lap though. Who do we ride on board with? Seems like Khan is one of the first on track. Going through What's that turn called? Oh, I've forgotten the name of that corner. But Mackenzie starts his flying lap, doing 329 kilometers an hour, which is decently quick, opting to not take the sausage curbs, which I believe is the sensible option, and then taking Variante Villeneuve quite well and into Tosa, going quite wide and not getting the best minimum speed, so it's not been the best lap so far. And then now we go into Piratella, and pretty decent. And then now we go into Acqua Minerale, and barely keeping within limits there. That was really on edge. Into Variante Alta, going in quite fast, not so quick out, and backing off the lap. And there is fuel in the car to do another lap, so we might see back-to-back flying laps. Is this Ravazza? I think it might be Ravazza. I'll just quickly change the volume because the things in OBS seem to indicate it's a bit loud from the game. Mackenzie's on a second flying lap, although it doesn't have the full battery. Taking Tamburello a little bit hot, but otherwise very nice. As Wodge has just said something in chat. Oh, that's really not good. I think that will be another aborted lap, unfortunately. Yeah. Oh, is it? I'm not sure if this lap's being aborted. But into Piratella, 5th gear. This seems way under the limit. Pretty sure this is an in lap. Who else is on an... So we've got Tuabti on an out lap. And there's also Dominic who's on an out lap. So the game is apparently kind of quiet now. So I think I'll just plonk it back up to 4 and then maybe take 1 decibel off in OBS. I'll go from -5 to -6. And I'll go back into the game. And we're good. But I think we'll ride on board with Dominic, who is our championship leader by actually a pretty considerable margin after picking up back-to-back wins once penalties were factored in. Dominic's really been the dark horse of this championship, getting P2 in the opening round at Silverstone, and then not scoring any points in Miami, but then picking up another podium at Austria, and then 4th place at Australia, but then the 2 wins have really propelled him into a good place in the championship. It seems like Groenewegen binned it, but Dominic definitely hasn't. And this is his first lap, and apparently this is his first lap since winning the race last week, and he goes way too hot into Villeneuve. But Thutosa gets a much better drive. I did not get sent the proper intermission thingy, so I just opened Microsoft Paint. And just keeping within track limits at Piratella, that is what I call skill. And then braking way too late into Acqua Minerale, and almost binning it on exit, but it seems like the game hasn't invalidated it because he's lost time. So we'll see how good of a banker this is. Getting some decent traction in 4th gear. Out of Variante Alta into the corner I believe is Ravazza, but I'm not entirely sure. Getting some okay rotation. This is a very understeery corner, and then getting on the throttle nice and early, opening the DRS, and it is a 18-1. That is not a good lap. I mean, the track limits have been a bit on the limit at some corners, and then Acqua Minerale just lost a lot of time. I think this lap is being backed off. So our championship leader, basically, if he wants to do anything better than where he is now, it's going to need to be a much better lap. Well, let's ride on board with Koziel as he starts a lap. Third gear is an unconventional choice, but it might work given how understeery the corner is. And he's maximising the distance before the start-finish line to be able to carry as much speed onto the straight as possible. Seems like he's running a pretty high downforce, only doing 323 into the braking point. And not getting some nice rotation in Tamburello. Now into Villeneuve. The Williams driver goes decent through the first apex, lacking minimum speed through the second. This hasn't been a great lap so far, although he is 1/10 up, although I'm not sure how good the previous lap was. And now getting on the throttle out of Toza is pretty decent. As Mitch is currently on the toilet and enjoying my commentary, as Koziel actually took Piratella and now Acqua Minerale very nicely, so this lap is starting to come together. And now through Variante Alta, Cornerway can gain or lose a lot of time. Using second gear, interestingly, but it seems like he's still got good traction despite the short gear ratio, but turning in a bit early for Rivazza. And it's not been the best lap overall, and coming across the line, and it is a 16.6, which is almost a 2/10 improvement, but that's only good enough to move up by a place or 3, I believe. Right now Mitch is in 15th and appears to actually be quite safe in 15th, because Bakalik hasn't set a lap. Actually he's heading, or is that Keeler? It might be Keeler that just headed out. And Zach and Shurik seem like they're willing to sit inside the pits. Which Alfa Romeo just left? Okay, it was Keeler who went on an out lap. Is Khan currently on a lap? Seems to be so, but it is quite a slow lap, so we won't ride on board. But meanwhile, the Alpine of Ashley Robinson, who's currently P5 and only 3/10 off the provisional pole lap, has invalidated this lap, which is a 4:25. I don't know what's happening. As someone's reminded me in chat that Backlit has a quali ban. Thank you for that. So, you know why Snape is at least ahead of Backlit as the Red Bull pulls out nicely away from Robinson, as pretty decent through Villeneuve. That is a very tricky corner to hook up, especially in qualifying. But Robinson was able to get a decent run through Toes, although I wasn't watching very attentively. And out through Piratella, pretty decent minimum speed using most of the track, although not as much as some others. And then, running wide into Acqua Minerale, and that will be lap over. And looking at the steering wheel, there is 1.5 laps of fuel left. But who else is on a lap? I think Kent is just starting a lap now, so we'll ride on board to see if the person currently in second place in the championship is able to get pole position. Gets a really nice run through Tamburello and is now blasting down onto Villeneuve with all the momentum. That's beautiful. I'm not like Crofty where I do some like entire essay about everything that happens. Like a nice corner. Pretty decent speed through Pivotal, although a bit of understeer. That's now going through Aqua Minerale. He takes it pretty decently, although I had to do a little lift on exit, but that's probably to keep the car under control. It's now going into Variante Alta, and that is not good. Really not good. I don't think Kent will be on pole position. There's only 18 seconds left. That's not enough to get back. What about Khan? Khan appears to be starting the lap now. It's a 150 something out lap. This is calling it very fine with 1 second left on the clock. Mackenzie begins one final flying lap. Unfortunately, it seems like Kent has binned it on pit entry. Khan takes some pretty decent speed through Tamburello and now into Villeneuve. Minimum speed is not that great, if I'm going to be completely honest. And now into Toza. That's okay. Although it doesn't have pole lap vibes to me. Though Mackenzie does appear to get much better rotation than Kent did on the previous lap. Third gear through Aqua Minerale causes the rear to be a bit loose, which will have lost a tenth or 3. Yeah, it's not good. The game has not awarded an invalidation, presumably because that was a time loss. But now we go into the final corner and we'll see if it's an improvement, because Keeler is unable to improve. What lap time does Khan set? 59.98 looking at the steering wheel. So I think that is basically matched the previous lap, which keeps Mackenzie on the front row, but isn't enough to improve. Look at all these tyres. Also, Pena, Eberson, Zappler and Khan have all used 4 sets, so we'll not have a brand new set of softs. That's for all the race engineers. Although I will probably forget that pretty quickly, as right now I just need to adjust some settings on my monitor, which hopefully shouldn't affect the stream in any way. That button, overdrive, turn that down. Hopefully the problems I was having are gone. So here's our lineup for the race. Top 7 separated by less than 4/10, so this is actually a pretty tight grid. I think any of them have a chance of winning with that pace. And we have Snape. I don't think met the 107% rule. And then we have 5 people who have not been able to set a lap time as of yet. Why are we advancing? I guess no one's clicking the button. The advance button. What do I ramble on about? Okay, now we're going. So, strategy. If it's a dry race, I don't think the soft will be used unless there's a safety car. Although I've heard rumours of it being a wet race. Oh, it's a full wet race. This is going to spice things up. Will anyone try and risk it on the intermediates? That's going to be quite interesting. Because the pit lane here is like 28 seconds or something ridiculous. Because it's just such a long pit lane. So I suspect that it might be worth starting on the inters. Although the inters on this game are not as powerful in the full wets as they were in last game. So apparently it's going to go from full wets to intermediate conditions and then to dry. As we have 3, 4 and 5 red lights. And I'm in spectator mode, but away we go. And it seems like Groenewegen got a drive-through penalty for a jump start. However, someone who hasn't jumped the start by the rules, but metaphorically has, is Keeler, who is able to comfortably take turn 1 in first place. as now we'll see if anyone has decided to go for the intermediates. No one has done. But we'll go back a bit to see if there's anything happening, as it seems like there's a lot of cars going side by side, as Groenewegen decides to back out, although Pim will have to serve the drive-through penalty, as Koziel's got a 5-second time penalty for passing the corner and gaining a place. Whether that's fair or not, we'll find out later. However, a 5-second penalty will automatically get served in the pits, and I don't think these full wet tyres are going to make it to the end, as there seems to be a spin at the back of Mischler, unfortunately, so the Mercedes drops back. But there's also been some carnage with Backlick as well, who has now been shuffled to the back after an incident on the exit of Piratella. But up ahead, as our championship leader's actually just gone straight across the corner and taking it very careful to avoid getting a penalty for track limits. However, our leader Keeler is already a full second outside of Tuabti, so if Keeler can bridge a few seconds before they box the intermediates, that will make the strategy a lot less stressful, let's just say. As Groenewegen comes into the pit to serve the drive here, Stiebel, I think, might have a broken front wing, as well as his teammate, but unfortunately gets a 5-second time penalty for speeding into the pit lane. Now let's see if intermediates or full wets are going on. It's full wets for now. The front wing change is taking forever. Actually, both halves need a front wing swap. Go back and board with the leaders as Keeler is slowly building the gap. And right now it's just like a train of cars, because in the wet it is kind of hard to do any overtaking. So apparently it's turning dry 45 minutes in, so I think we might be seeing a lot of interslicks, if you get what I mean. So maybe starting on inters would have been the wrong choice, as you would have had to box again for a fresh set of inters. And the intermediates on this game, if there's still a drop of water on the track, they're still not too bad, as unfortunately it seems like Rosinski at the back in the AlphaTauri has had a bit of a spin. Eberson's using second gear, probably for the additional rotation, but the amount of wheel spin you get in a second, probably a bit too much for the full wet conditions. But ahead, Zappler is following quite closely behind Mackenzie, who is starting to drop off the back of the leaders and actually runs a bit deep into Tamburello, which will invite Zappler going into Villeneuve, although I don't think the move is really that feasible, and Zappler decides to not go for it. We'll see, however, if the Alpine is able to go for it into Tosa, which is not the case, unfortunately, after getting a bad exit out of Villeneuve. But meanwhile, Keeler and Tuabti have been able to stretch to over 2-second gap, and all this fighting now means that Eberson is only 2/10 behind the Alpine of Zappler, as they're taking it very gingerly through these corners, as it seems like there's very little grip given the wetness of the track. But it seems like Eberson's got a much better exit than Zappler, and will maybe try and send it around the outside, as Eberson decides to back out to avoid any collision. Then gets a bit stuck on the curve, although not that stuck, which will allow Koziel to begin to close into his teammate, although I suspect they'll just hold position for now and save the battery. As we have a yellow flag as Maszynski has had another spin out of Aqua Minerale. It will be interesting to see when the track starts to dry out and who goes for inters. And also behind, Schuret seems to be running much lower wings. Something, or maybe that was a pre-planned swap. But it seems like Showstack's internet is not ideal, let's just say. But Ken is quite close behind the Aston Martin of Ivanek, but gets an absolute slap of oversteer coming out of Villeneuve, which will cost quite a few tenths, but fortunately he keeps it out of the wall coming out of the turn. And in the battle for the lead, Turabti's right up the gearbox of Keeler, so Keeler has not been able to run away, unlike what I suggested after lap 1, as Turabti almost runs into the back of Keeler, but fortunately no one is hurt, as it seems like Majinski's had another spin. That's unfortunate. But that very minor tap of the back does mean that Turabti has now slightly fallen off the back of Keeler, although anything can happen in the full wets, like getting a tiny bit of oversteer, which is not too hard, boom, that's half a second gone or something, as Zappler and Emerson both set the fastest lap, so it seems like the cars behind are beginning to very slowly close into Keeler, who has run a bit deep into Tamburello, as Turek, and now actually Majinski's got a penalty for corner cutting, and that was an instant penalty, so I believe that was for Variante Alta, so the other AlphaTauri is really struggling, and someone else who seems to be starting to struggle is Keeler, who is struggling to keep Turabti behind. Meanwhile, all the mid-pack is starting to close in on the two leaders, as Keeler's pace really has not been optimal, as Majinski heads for the pits. Is that to get a wing swap? Probably is. As it seems like Turabti's got a far better exit than Keeler, and goes down the inside. Oops, wrong person. As they're going side by side through Variante Alta, as Turabti's falls slightly off track, but is able to get the run on Keeler, and seems like Turabti might have been awarded an illegal overtake or something, or is Keeler just running so much less downforce, as Turabti runs wide into the corner, which allows Keeler to get past. And what this has done is invited Mackenzie back into the fight for the lead, as it seems like Jonas Turabti is running a wet setup, whereas Mackenzie certainly is not. Yeah, Turabti's definitely running a wet setup. That might explain the pace advantage, but running high wings at Imola does make you a sitting duck on the start-finish straight. As meanwhile, Kent and Ivanek have swapped position. We'll go back to the leaders, as right now we're having a pretty interesting three-way battle. As unfortunately for Turabti, he loses the rear bit on exit, and what that has allowed is Zappler to now close to within DRS range, if that was a thing in the wets. Now that they're all so bunched up, going one lap too early or one lap too late to the inters could be the difference between winning and, well, not winning the race. Although if it does switch to dries, they will have DRS. But the track still seems a bit too wet for the intermediate tyres, as there are still puddles off the racing line, which don't actually affect the car in any way on the game. It's just a visual indication, as we'll see whether Zappler's able to get past Turabti, who is on the high downforce setup, as it seems like Turabti's got a brilliant exit with the additional downforce, but is dropping back, but seems to have a big enough advantage to stay ahead for now. So Zappler's doing 3:05 and Turabti seems, I think, was doing 2:93 last lap. I think we'll run more with... How has Turabti got so much speed in the corners? Actually high downforce, that's why. Although, when the track turns dry, I think Jonas is going to be in a bit of a pickle with the lack of straight line speed, as it seems like Turabti's actually been able to mug Khan on the exit of the corner. However, Khan, with the much lower wings, is able to pull alongside going into Piratella. However, Turabti with the downforce is just able to go straight down the inside and make quick work, as unfortunately Majinski's had another spin. He's almost about to get lapped, but we'll ride him more with Zappler, who's going to be trying to follow Tuabti past Khan, although they don't have a big wing offset, which makes it less entertaining. Although Mackenzie does have a decent snap of oversteer on exit of the corner, so that will invite Zappler into the Vatsa, but the Alpine backs out. But the Aston Martin runs wide and then loses the rear on entry, and the Alpine loses the rear on exit. However, overall, the Aston Martin of Mackenzie Khan is now also being mugged by Eberson, who appears to also be running a high downforce setup, which Khan definitely is not. This is probably some of the biggest setup variation I've seen in a long time, as Khan is forced to take the curb, and that allows Eberson through. Although, oh gosh, this wing offset is insane. But Kozil is now also going to have an opportunity to try and get past the Aston Martin, who has very little downforce. This wing offset is entertaining, but it seems like the rain has started to lighten off a bit, so it might switch to inters in a few laps' time, as it seems like Khan is really struggling in the middle sector with the downforce deficiency. And Kozil might actually get a run into Variante Alta, although I do not think it would be a reasonable move, as Kozil decides to hold back for another corner and hope that Khan has a bit of an oopsie-daisy on traction, which is not the case this lap. But Tuabti, with the high downforce, has been able to close back up to Keeler, and all the fighting behind now means that they have a 2.5 second gap. Now, oh gosh, that straight line speed is just insane, as Mishler has been given an instant penalty at Variante for corner cutting, as Kent has set the fastest lap. So Kent is really flying in these conditions, as Tuabti lost close to a second on the start-finish straight. So it seems like there are some enormous downforce differences amongst the field. And so is the pace well, so is the... Unfortunately, Mitch has had to spin in Tamburello. And also, right now the gaps seem a bit big, although I'm pretty sure they'll close back in as soon as we get like through the middle sector and stuff. Although impressively, none of them have got terminal damage yet, which is quite good, considering how tricky the conditions are. Emerson's just able to carry so much more speed and get on the throttle so much earlier with the wet setup, though the Williams driver is basically out of battery, which certainly is not the case for the Aston Martin. We'll have an absolutely massive straight line speed advantage, so I do not think Eberson really has a chance going into Ravazza, as Peña's got a time penalty for warning accumulation. So they are starting to pick up the penalties, but it's not drastically quick, as now we'll just see that Mackenzie with the low wings is able to just pull away just like that. So Eberson's doing 395 and Mackenzie's doing 350, more than 315. Yeah, that's a big difference, like 20 clicks, I believe. So this is a really entertaining race with the wing differences, although for me it is. You don't have to agree. And meanwhile, that wing difference has allowed Tuabti to close into Keeler like a hawk through the corners, because unfortunately Muzinski is getting lapped now, which is basically race over, unless you get really lucky with safety car timings. Well, Jonas is just able to get on the throttle so much earlier than Keeler, but then Keeler just pulls away on the straight. Though Tuabti is putting Keeler under a lot of pressure, although that might have been a track limit warning there. Because now we head into... Wait, that ghosting that I'm seeing on my screen, that might be the game, not my monitor. But Zappler's actually set the fastest lap in clean air, and then Khan has been able to beat it despite having no downforce in the wet. Everton's so much slower. The straight is ridiculous. I don't know what the Williams are going to try and do when it turns dry. Although speaking of drying up, the rain seems to have eased off a lot, and I suspect that we will see someone box for Inters in the near future. As Turabshi's been able to get past Keeler. Not a surprise given the pace advantage, but also a surprise given the straight line speed disadvantage, as Turabshi's just able to pull away in the corners. Although we'll see what Keeler's able to do on the main straight, but this wing difference is really a big deal. Meanwhile, Zappler has been able to catch up to the two leaders, and I wonder whether anyone will box for Inters now, because apparently it is light rain, which I can see on screen. And the track looks like it's beginning to dry out, although there are still a few puddles. Although Mark will probably be telling them full wets are still the fastest tyre for now. Mackenzie's again been able to set the fastest lap, while saving a bit of battery, which to be honest isn't too hard for full wets. As Keeler was actually not that far behind Turabshi going into turn 1, although the additional downforce on the AlphaTauri will be a very big deal throughout the rest of the lap, as Keeler's just able to carry so much less speed, as it seems like Mitch Snaper's in the box. I assume that's for Inters. Yes, it is for Inters. As Keeler almost loses it on exit, which will invite Zappler to the back, as Majinski has unfortunately binned it and retired, as that has brought out a safety car, which I suspect will see everyone into the pits to go onto the intermediate compound of tyres. As unfortunately I need to just go for a minute. I will be back soon, but when we're back I'll presumably be seeing everyone behind the safety car on intermediates. Okay, I am back now, and it seems like Turabti, Keeler, Khan and Koziel have decided to stick out on full wets, which I don't think is a particularly good strategy. Koziel almost overtakes Khan. But what that does mean is that Eberson and Zappler are now P1 and P2, and Kent, who was showing some very good pace on the full wets, is now up into P3 effectively. Once you consider that though the track is definitely intermediates now. Anyone who didn't box, and they're all into the pits. So that will be a very costly mistake for Tuab and Keeler, who were previously leading the race, but now are, what's it called? How do you get track limits under safety car? That is my question. It seems like those who have stuck out are going to be quite far behind. We'll actually see where Tuabti, our previous race leader, emerges, and it is in 12th position. So that is an 11th place loss. So this safety car has really not been good for them. I think there's one more lap. And then, although on last year's game, the safety car did like to stay out for 3 laps at Imola instead of the 2, which it does at most tracks. But hopefully we'll have it in this lap so you get as much racing as possible. The track is definitely in intermediate, so it'll be interesting to see whether the Inters are going to the end, both in terms of the weather and the tyre wear. The intermediates are a very robust tyre on this game, so I think they should work unless it dries out significantly. And then it will be interesting to see whether some of the people at the back decide to stick it out on Inters until the end of the race. I think we'll have one more lap under safety car. So apparently there's 15 more minutes of light rain, so that will bring us to about lap 25 probably, and then it will stop raining, which means the track will probably dry yeah, about 27, 28, maybe a bit before. So then it will dry out, yeah, it will dry out about 27, 28, which leaves about 4 laps. So the pit lane is about 28 seconds divided by 4 laps, so the softs seem to be 7 seconds a lap quicker than the Inters. And if the Inters don't overheat, that will not be the case. If the Inters overheat, that might happen. And we've also got to factor in that the softs probably won't switch on for the first lap under, or when they box to them. So we'll have a few corners of treachery when they really need to be gaining 7 seconds a lap. Although it might dry out earlier. Seems like it's going to be a very interesting race, as Kent is trying to do burnouts to heat the tyres up. But what the safety car will allow is for 18 of the 19 drive. What's happened to Robinson? As Koziel's crashed into Groenewegen. What happened there? That is silly. So Robinson is... Seems like Robinson's had a disconnect, so I'll try and get the car back in just before the restart. A safety car is in this lap, as I predicted, and Zappler in the lead. It's just taking the pace at a slow speed so that a gap can be built up to the safety cars. Robinson has been able to join back into the session. So we will not, fortunately we will not have an AI car. So Zappler's going really slowly. This is an interesting restart. Now what wings is Kent running? I'm not sure. We know that Eberson is running some very high downforce. I believe Zappler's running low downforce. Seems like Kent's also running extremely low downforce. 30 km/h advantage, and Kent has more battery. We'll now see Emerson close in at an absolute rate of knots. This is what I like about full wet races. No one has any idea what wings to run. Kozil's pitted for softs, which I believe is the wrong call. It is still raining and the inters on this game are so good. Although that might be because his wing is broken, although I do not think the soft tyres are the right choice. But meanwhile, Zappler's been able to open up a 1.4 second lead ahead of Kent, who hasn't got the best restart. Although we saw on the wets his pace was quite good, so we'll see how it develops. We're watching Koziel, who has literally zero grip on the cold, soft compound tyres, so I think he'll need to box back onto intermediates if he wants to avoid getting lapped. That is so little grip. We'll see whether Kent is able to close up to Zappler and how far Eberson falls behind Kent. So Zappler does a 25.9, which is about 4 to 5 seconds a lap quicker. That is a massive straight line speed difference. It seems like Penya's also in the pits. Hopefully that's for front wing damage and not to go to softs. I can't believe I'm saying hopefully that's front wing damage, but it is what it is. We've seen some questionable strategy calls so far, but it seems like Robinson's unfortunately had another disconnect. We'll send one final invite, but if this keeps happening we might need to call it quits on the race, unfortunately. Let's ride more with Eberson with the super high ones, as Robinson is back in the session and hasn't immediately been yeeted by EA servers. Seems like Eberson's been able to get a good run out of the corner, but on the straights just can't do anything. So we have 290 something and then just 280 something for Eberson. And considering it's not a particularly long straight, that just highlights the difference in... Yeah. This is just memeable. As Eberson's able to set the fastest lap, but Kent's just pulling away at a rate of knots as Koziel has come back in for intermediates, but unfortunately is a lap down, so we'll have a lot of blue flags, unfortunately, which is possibly race over after a few questionable strategy decisions. We're riding more with Keeler, who's trying to get past Turabti. You know that Keeler's running much less wing than Jonas. Yeah, the wing differences are pretty crazy. As it seems like, although Jonas is able to get a very good run through the corner on the straights, he's just a sitting duck. Like, he's able to get on full throttle so early, but then there's so much drag on the car that it doesn't really do much. Like, you can see how much better of a run the AlphaTauri gets, but then the Ferrari just pulls away on the straights. But Turabti's going to send it up the inside, and as Sosdat decides to turn in on Turabti, which will allow Keeler to get past. That might be referred to the stewards, and we'll find out as soon as Keeler thinks about going up the inside. What happened to... I think Turabti maybe went quite a bit deep, as Kent has been able to set the fastest lap in hot pursuit of Zappler. This race really has not gone well for the AlphaTauri. Oh gosh. No, stop. This is just pain. Seems like there's the ghosted car of Koziel. He's just driving through other cars ghosted, despite having blue flags. I'm really not sure what's happening. Although there is a... I think it's 10 seconds and 4 penalty points per sector. You drive inside another car, so Koziel should probably stop doing it to avoid getting a penalty. This is pretty ridiculous. So, I think that car we're looking on board with is Keeler, so one of our championship protagonists. As Keeler actually gets a time penalty for multiple warnings for cutting that corner, although I think he might be blaming Koziel on that one, as it seems like Koziel has finally decided to back off. Although it's an interesting place to let a car through. But I think he's now letting them through, but oh my goodness. That is not the best technique for doing it. But Groenewegen going to try and get back past Tuabti. He was unfortunately forced off track, but with the higher wings and downforce is able to get past in the corner, as that's allowed our championship leader Dominic back into the fight. And this is probably the first time I've mentioned him this race, as Mishla has unfortunately had a bit of a spinalla out of Tamburello. And this really hasn't been the best race for our championship leader, but on the upside, Keeler and Tuabti P3 and 4 are right ahead of him, and he has a pretty decent buffer to those. By decent, I mean 13-point buffer in the championship. Although Kent right now, let me just do some quick maths, is going to score 18 points. So you should probably look at Tuabti and Keeler going side by side. But Kent right now is going to score 18 points, which will put him on 103 ahead of Dominic. So, whoa, that was sketchy. Seems like these two are fighting quite hard. But we'll go on board with... What wings is Dominic running? Seems to be medium wings. But Groenewegen's running low wings. As Tuabti's been mugged by Keeler on the straight, which is not much of a surprise. Because unfortunately Robinson has decided to call it quits on the race and retired in the pits. And what else is there to talk about? In the lead, Konrad Zappler, who is currently P9 in the championship, after winning in Silverstone but not having any good races since then, is currently leading and slowly extending that gap out in front, as Tuabti is able to gain so much under braking. It will be interesting to see when it dries out, because if our projections from a... Tuabti tries to send it around the outside. There's some pretty brave driving, but I think Groenewegen might have something to say about that on the upcoming straight as Zappler. It's a 24/7, which is the fastest lap of the race so far. So Robinson's game crashed and then desynced. So I think retiring in the pits was probably the right choice. Tuabti's half a second ahead. 4/10. Isn't as much as I expected. Tuabti will have the inside for Tamburello, which with the additional grip is basically the position safe. And Jonas is going to try to get past Mitch with the additional downforce. He runs a bit deep into Villeneuve, however Tuabti isn't able to capitalise, unfortunately. But on the exit of the corner, using all the curb, getting some good traction. Well, it seems like Mitch does have sufficient downforce to keep up in the corners. No, Tuabti definitely has more. This is so funny. And now sending it up the inside into Variante Alta. As we have some robust defending from Mitch, as Konrad Zappler seems to be pulling away. Seems like as Groenewegen's going to try and go around the outside, but backs out of it, knowing the difference in wings and also the large difference in battery. But Mackenzie Khan in the Aston Martin. Oh my goodness. What wings is Pim running? These almost run into the back of each other. But Groenewegen is now currently in P10 before penalties, with much less wing. This race has just been absolutely painful. Turabti leading the race until the safety car came out, not boxing, staying out and then getting... Oh, that's not good. What a silly incident. And Snape now has no wing. I'll probably have to be stewarding that at some point, as Groenewegen's got a 3-second time penalty for track limits, presumably at Aqua Minerale. We're not on board with Pim right now, and we're on board with Tomas Kovacs. I've I've covered a lot in previous races, but this is the first time in this race that I'm talking about him. Seems to be in the high wing gang. We're running a bit deep into the final corner and really losing a lot as Bakalik has binned it. And Snape has now got a time penalty for track limit warning accumulations, as Bakalik is able to get back on track. What else is happening? Let's go on board with David Hoy, who is closely behind Ivanek, who in turn is closely behind Churek. And we'll see what wings they're running. I think Ivanek's running fairly low wings. But the track does appear to be getting a little bit dry, but there are still raindrops, so I suspect that everyone will stay on inters for the rest, as Shostak has got a time penalty for multiple warnings, as Mitch has decided to go on softs but has binned it on pit exit. And almost bins it again. Yeah, I don't think the softs are going to work. I think he's made the same mistake as Koziel, as Zapla's now approaching from behind. This has really not been a good race for Mitch after having a bit of an incident with, who was it? I think it was Turabti. He's had to box into another set of inters for a wing change, as Keelan and Shostak have had a bit of a battle, as the Ferrari is able to stay in front of the Aston Martin for now. But we'll see whether Keelan is able to get in front, because the Alfa Romeo is running relatively low wings. And behind, it seems like the Red Bull of Tomas have been able to get past our championship leader. Although Dominic does not have a penalty, unlike all the drives ahead, so that could be pretty pivotal if there were to be a safety car at some point. As it seems like the Haas, I'm not sure what wings the Haas is running, seems to be roughly medium wings. Well, I can't be exactly sure. Let's second board for the main straight, as Mackenzie Khan has just set the fastest lap and actually is going to breeze past David Hoy with the lower wings. So riding board with, because Koziel's now actually set the fastest lap on the intermediates, interestingly. We might try and unlap himself, although that will be quite difficult because I don't think he has a big enough pace advantage. We'll ride on board with Hoy, just gets so much better traction and then has so much more wing. This is really funny. It will be interesting to also see who's opted to jack up the pressures on the tyres to help with the wear, because overheating isn't normally much of a problem on the wet compounds unless it starts to dry up. And being able, unfortunately Hoy runs right wide and gets a 3-second penalty. But unless your tyres burn up, actually on the intermediates, being able to do, as unfortunately Khan has binned it and Pierce have gotten front wing damage, although opts to not enter the pits as Mitch has unfortunately looped it round at Variante Alta on the softs, which he decided to stick with now as Keeler is into the pits. I hope that's for a front wing and not for softs. It's for softs. Maybe their intermediates are starting to run out of life, so the race might be won based off who increase their pressures. Let's see whether Keeler bins it or... yeah, bins it. They kept out of the wall but did cross the pit line. Someone reports it, I guess it's going to be a penalty, unfortunately. I don't think I will because I just don't have the time. But who else is going to be forced into the pits because of intermediate? Cozy are going to do the same thing again. They're going for soft when it isn't ready. Yeah, it's definitely not time for the softs. As he's going so slowly, he's brought out the yellow flags. But meanwhile, Everson is actually Churek. Oh, has Churek also gone for softs? Actually, it stopped raining now, so softs might start working. Actually, the track seems to have dried a lot in the last 30. Wait, the tracks was flipped from... actually, no, that's still Inters, actually. I'm not sure. Does the track look Inters or dries to you? Probably still Inters. Although it might be the cold tyres, although Churek seems to be the first person to come out on softs and not immediately bin it. Actually, I think now is the time. I think now is the time, lap 28, as I guessed. Although I believe that staying out on inters in the wet will be the best thing to do, as Everson's been able to get in front of Kent in the downforce section, but Kent's going to absolutely send it into Ravazza. Fortunately, no contact is made. Will anyone box? Zappler stays out quite clever. What is that traction? As Leapage says, no such thing as too wet at Imola. He's watching Mitch, apparently. And I don't think Mitch has had the best of races. Seems like the softs are finally not terrible. What? Seems like the softs are finally not a terrible tyre. But still not worth spending 28 seconds to get something equally good. Michelin's in the pits. For another set of inters. Maybe the intermediates just wouldn't have made it to the end, although I think that if you're boxing, softs might be the best choice, as the track does look like it's starting... actually, maybe not. I think Michelin's tyres just wouldn't have made it to the end. There's not enough pressure in the rears, but we'll see how Michelin compares with Pena on pit exit. Seems like Michelin has a lot more grit. So seems like neither of them have a lot of grip, as Eberson's pace seems to be really good right now. Maybe Eberson's setup is quite nice. It seems like the inters are overheating. I think the softs have finally just reached the crossover with 2.5 laps. Actually, it's probably Shirabchi's got a penalty now, so his race goes from bad to worse. Yeah, I think now it's finally switched to soft, just as Michelin boxes for another set of inters. We'll see if any of... With 3 laps remaining, I do not think any of the leaders will box if their tyres can make it. But that is a big if. As Shurek sets the fastest lap on soft, but is like half a minute at least behind the leaders. Actually, let's see how far ahead Zappler is. 44 seconds. We'll see if any of their tyres blow up. Lepage says, depends if it dries as quickly as Miami gets wet. Even though the track's bone dry right now, you need to stay out because Skila's unfortunately decided to call this race quits. As interestingly, DRS is not online yet, which I'm not sure why. The track looks bone dry. And Eberson has so much wing. As he's somewhat forced off wide and is forced to back out, which has allowed Kent to get past in the battle for P2 and P1 in the championship. Where's our championship leader? 14th place. Although the softs seem far better than the intermediates at this point in time. Although Churek's only done a 22.2, which is like only a second or two faster than what Zappler's been doing for the past 15 laps. So Lepage says that 17 laps on inters is fine. Depends what pressures you're running. As DRS has just been enabled, and I think Michelin's got DRS. And I think is also running lower wings. I'm not sure. And has more battery. Oh wow. There's absolutely nothing that Dominic could do. Oh, and he also says the red light of deception. But up ahead, Eberson is dropping back despite having DRS. Although both of them do not have any battery. So we head into the final lap as there is a McLaren that spun. I believe that is Mitch. It'll be interesting to see if Eberson's downforce can allow him to make any moves. Although now that the track is basically dry, I don't think that will be the case. Ooh. Kosil sets the fast lap of a 19.4, which is what you'd hope for on the soft tyres, although he is 2 or 3 laps down. Not sure how many. It's more than 1. The riding board on Eberson, who is running much higher wings, which worked quite well back when it was full wet, but now that it's dry, it just seems like he'll not be able to make a move as he runs a bit hot into Variante Alta, which I believe will allow Kent to take P2 in this race. But up ahead, it seems like nothing's been able to stop Zappler. Takes a race win. And now riding with Kent and Eberson. We're just crossing the line right now. And there's Ivanek, who seems to be struggling a lot. Khan behind, although Khan has a penalty. And so does Hoy behind. As they cross the line. Will Churek be able to go for any moves on anyone? I don't think so, because the intermediates on this game are actually quite good in the dry. As Kosil does an 18.9, which is the fastest lap, which should be a point in the championship, as Churek actually picks off Tomas on penalties. A snake. It's 10 seconds for track limits. What's happened to Snape? Is he going to get disqualified by the game? What's that rubber banding? That was a pretty spicy race with the safety car I think he's got rear wing damage or 110 degrees rears. What's going on? What are you doing, Mitch? Hurry up. We're bored. You only have 1:25 to get across the start-finish line. As David Hoy regrets the wet setup. So does Emerson. But Kent doesn't regret the dry setup. That was an interesting... Yeah, Emerson lost half a second on the straight. It was hilarious watching the difference. It's really not been a good race for some of our people, one of which being our championship, and it's raining again, one of which being our championship leader, Dominic, who has finished in 13th place, over a minute behind the leader. Here's all the tyres everyone went on. Yes, the legendary wet into soft strap. Here's all the penalties. That's a lot. And I think this one will also be longer than normal. Not ridiculous. Long. But not insane. And I think... I'll actually ask them now if anyone wants an interview. Will anyone join us? Okay, it seems like Khan is going to... Okay, I just need to join the voice chat thing. And then hopefully we're good. I think I'll just shut the game down now so we don't get the noises.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Good, good.
That was an interesting race. With like the...
It was, yeah.
Some people were running what seemed like 0-0 and others 50-50.
It did, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about, but yeah, no, definitely, I had a bit of influence for that setup from Adrian Newey or something because, in a straight line, I just don't think anyone really was able to compete. I'm pretty sure I gained a second on someone, unfortunately, for them anyway. So yeah, the setup definitely came in later. But yeah, I mean, it was a fun race, even though I went down 2 positions. But main thing was that wet to into crossover on the safety car.
Yeah. That safety car.
Yeah.
4 people stayed out on lap 1, so I had to go get a drink during the safety car after it came out. And I said when I left, I hope everyone is in a safety car train on the Inters when I get back.
Yeah.
And then I sit back down and I see that the leaders are still out on wets.
Well, yeah, I was just told whatever the leaders do what they do, and
if you're behind someone, always do the opposite under safety car.
To be fair, actually, 1 and 2 stayed out, 3 went in, so I did the opposite and stayed out. So yeah, but they didn't end up well now.
Safety car advice: if it's a 50-50,
yeah,
do the opposite of the person in front of you, because that way, them being ahead of you now means nothing. And also, when the weather's changing, you need to be on the tyres that will be fastest 5 minutes after the safety car is in.
Well, yeah, didn't have that foresight today, I guess,
Yeah. So thank you, Mackenzie. I think we'll move on to Eberson. Did you enjoy your setup?
No, I very much despise it since I lost what was right around 6 tenths on the straight, which I of course gained throughout the other parts of the track. But I would much rather have been able to be keeping up there, and I think that would have made my race a bit easier, and I would probably have been able to get past the kid, but he was also super fast today.
Yeah. So it seems like a few people, so you, Tuabti, and Hoy were all running
Yeah.
high downforce, and you're just so much faster when you were in clean air in the
Yeah.
wets. But
Very much.
I guess it didn't work out when the track started to dry out.
No, it was very bad, but I think I got very lucky with the safety car that I decided to pit,
Yeah.
since it put me up to P2, and basically I just got Kent ahead of me, and it was so hard to
I think
catch
there
up.
was Zappler as well.
Yeah.
But I think we'll move on to Kent now, who is here for an interview.
Yo,
P2.
how's it going?
Uh,
Yeah. So, oh, it was rough at the start. I'll be completely honest with you. I dropped down to P8, P9. Just an awful start, and I didn't want to get in the mix of anyone. Coming through turn 2, I almost spun, so I was like, damn, bro. Like I don't know what's gonna happen this race. And then I think I can't remember his name, but the championship leader right now, he got in. He
Dominic.
sandwiched me between a Ferrari and him. Yeah, but I didn't take any damage, so I just carried on.
That was lucky.
Yeah, like Brett. Yeah, like Brett was saying, like the wet weren't really a good, good overtaking, good, real battling, like can't think weather, let's say. But as soon as the inters come out, it was beautiful. It was so easy to just battle people.
I guess you lost out a lot less in the corners as soon as it switched from wets to inters.
Yeah, so obviously we changed to inters. I thought, you know what, unboxing, because by the time it's already getting, it's already drying up.
Yeah.
By the time the safety car's in, I was looking around the track, see where cars are. Everyone was so spread out, so I thought by the time the safety car's in, it will be inter anyway. So that's why I
Yeah.
boxed for inters. But yeah, no, I was doing really well up to the last 6 laps, and then because of my setup, my tires had gone off. And that's why Everson was catching me
In terms
through the
of
corners and
wear
stuff.
or temperature?
Just wear. Temperature weren't really an issue. I did keep a good eye on that. I think the max I got it to was 85 degrees Celsius. So
That's still within the working range of inters. Maybe you could have run slightly higher pressures for the wet.
yeah,
And that would have
but,
fixed the
it
wear.
worked.
What wings were you running?
Yeah, it worked. I was running 26.19.
And Everson is still here, so if you would like to inform us of what wings you were running.
I was on 34, 31.
That's crazy though, because I was going like past you like I had a skyrocket on the back of me.
Yeah.
I fucking bullet.
I thought the
coming
wing
up behind
difference
you
was
and I
about
thought,
20.
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought you were running like a good 40s, high 40s, but yeah, it turns out you weren't. It just the car was a bullet today.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
But yeah, no, that was an awesome race. Kind of happy that Keeler and the I can't remember his name, championship leader,
Dominic.
Dominic. That's it. Yeah, Dominic. I'm kind of happy that Keeler only scored a point today, so obviously that's him out of my pressure zone in a way.
I think
just gotta
you are
keep
now the
bagging points.
championship leader.
Yeah, I think I will be by 5 points.
So David Hoy has just said in the YouTube chat that he was running 46.50.
46.50. That's crazy. I did a few time trials in the wet, and I used the dry setup, and that was all right. And then I did try a wet setup, and I was losing a little bit of time with it. I just got on with the dry setup a little bit more. So I suppose it worked. I just had to make sure those tires survived. Yeah, I said to Michelin, my teammate, I said if it gets to lap 25 and it's dry, you got this box for softs, and then obviously Mitch went in.
Oh, the boxing for softs.
Yeah,
I was on
Mitch
stream saying, I don't know how many times I said this on stream. I hope they're boxing for a new wing, not for softs.
Yeah. Well, Mitch went in and he was my guinea pig, so
I
I
think
just
for
watched his
me,
time.
the first lap that I thought the softs would even work was 28, and they'd have to be 7 seconds a lap quicker to make
That was
sense.
push.
Which
that would
they
have been pushing
never,
it a bit, though.
unless the inters pop, they will never be 7 seconds a lap slower.
Yeah, no.
And I think
as
they're
soon as lap 30, I was going green again. I'd stopped going, red sectors. I was going green again. So I thought I'm staying out in these inters. Everyone else can box. That's fine by me. I'm staying out in the inters. I'm pushing it to the end.
Yeah, if Zappler would box, he would have won the race.
Yeah, and I was hoping that he would have fallen for it. He see everyone else going in for softs, and I thought maybe he'll think I'm going to go in, and I'm not. But he stayed out, which was definitely a good choice. I just couldn't catch him. Really couldn't. He had a good setup today and good race pace.
Yeah. So I guess if there's any last thing either you or Oscar wants to say, I guess maybe. It's Jeddah next.
Yeah, I can't wait for Jeddah.
Okay.
I do want to say one more thing though. I just want to say to everyone that raced today, it's like we have dry races where there's more safety cars and incidents, and we had a decent wet race. So big up to everyone today.
Yeah, good race.
Okay, thank you for watching, everyone, and I think I'll